Good evening and welcome to Ysleta Independent School District's Internal Audit Workshop by the Board of Trustees. The Internal Audit Workshop of the Board of Trustees is a workshop meeting of the board that the public is allowed to attend. As provided by Ysleta ISD Policy BED, we invite members of the public to make comments during the citizens' input portion at the start of the meeting according to instructions provided with the electronic posting notice of our meeting. Legally, the board may listen but may not enter into discussion on matters and citizens' input. This meeting of the Board of Trustees is called to order at 8:14 p.m. We have a quorum with Sotero Ramirez, Charlie Bustillos, Mike Rosales, Connie Woodruff, and myself, Cruz Ochoa. Shane Haggerty and Catherine Lucero is unable to join us and is considered excused. Vice President Bustillos, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence?
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
honor the Texas
Flag. Allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
We have a moment of silence. Thank you.
Ms. Mathewson, do we have citizen input this evening?
No, President Ochoa, we don't. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's Easter.
This is a workshop and no action will be taken. We will begin the workshop with the internal auditor, Ms. Amy Sanchez, to lead us through this workshop this evening. Ms. Sanchez.
Thank you. Thank you for being here with us this evening. We will get through this as efficiently as we can. The format for today, I will begin with our monthly briefing, which I would normally do during the earlier part of the meeting today, but since we're having this workshop, we postponed it to right now. After that, we will go over the risk assessment and review our risk matrix. And after that, we will go through our workshop booklet that we've provided to you. I know it's lengthy. We will not go page by page. This is more to serve as a resource and to share with you the items that we utilize on a regular basis. So I'd like to start with our monthly briefing. It is also brief this month. An update on our administrative status. We do still have the Auditor 2 vacancy. We had our interviews today and are pending HR for follow-up. And then, of course, the workshop that we have moved from the 29th to today. Project updates. We have 2 projects from last year remaining. That's the ALPS as well as professional services contracts. We are drafting those reports. For the current year audit plan, we have the 4 campus audits ongoing and 1 follow-up review on safety and security.
Excuse me,
Yes.
what are the professional services contracts for?
That was from last year's audit plan in 2022. It covers professional services, anything that fell under the professional services object code. So it's kind of like a contract audit for any contracts that we had professional services for.
Thank you.
There was little activity on our hotline this past period. We had no new calls. We did receive a special request review, which resulted in a new audit project. There was no evidence of fraud, but there are some procedural recommendations that we will be communicating, and that will be presented to you on a future draft report. We are just pending management's response, and we'll communicate that. This is the first quarterly update. It's a summary of our budget to actual hours. A more detailed summary is provided in your packet. Under the first purple tab, the monthly update. That concludes the monthly update. Do you have any questions before we move on to the risk assessment?
Any
Okay.
questions? No? Proceed.
At Mr. Ochoa's request, we moved this up ahead in the presentation. We were going to discuss it a little later, but we will discuss it now. As you saw during the February meeting, the meeting in which you approved our annual audit plan, we presented our risk analysis, and I wanted to present it again today. It is 3 pages, and it is one of your, it is your handout that's a loose handout titled 2023 Audit Universe, Risk Analysis and Risk Matrix. So as you see on here, what we do first, we create our audit universe, which is essentially we start with all the departments, we add in significant areas, significant grants. Each year we'll probably add and take off depending on what, we learn more about the district and new programs come on or old ones fall off. Each of these are lined up and we rate them in 7 different areas: management interest, budget risk, strategic risk, compliance risk, reputation risk, and the last 2, the time since last audit and whether there was a change in management in the last year. The first one, management risk, that comes from the various interviews that we have with leadership. We meet with various directors, with the chiefs, with the associates, and we get their input into what they consider some of the more significant risks at the district under their areas at the time. The budget risk depends on the size of their budget, but to make it easier, I want to point you to the last page on that handout, and that is our risk matrix. So this is, let me see. So this is kind of our scoring guide. This is how we rate 1 through 5. It's not a perfect science. It is subjective and dependent on professional judgment, but this is the tool that we developed and utilized to rate each of the risks. So within management interest, within budget risk, you can see regarding certain percentages of the budget. Strategic risk, is it something that's going to have a quick impact on the district achieving its strategic goals? Is it something that's going to have a more localized impact or maybe a delayed impact? Compliance risk, is it in an area with significant regulations, with complex regulations? Reputation risk, again, with the impact on the district's reputation, if it's significant, immediate, versus a delayed. And the last 2, the time since the last audit and a change in management, we just, again, it's all professional judgment. If management has been in place for a longer period of time, it's considered a lower risk. If it's a brand new person overseeing the area, we considered it to be a higher risk.
Amy?
Yes.
What are those percentages, if going back to the chart that has the numbers in it?
The percentages on the top?
Yeah.
So this,
Are those the weights?
these are the weights, yes.
Can I ask you why you do time since last audit only 7.5%?
I think I took 6 and 7 kind of to go hand in hand, so together they were 15%. But again, we have the ability to change it next year. It's not something that's set in stone.
Yeah.
It's just,
My concern as to the previous auditor was that we had some departments that hadn't been audited in 3 years. And they had a high volume of expendables, or they had a pretty good sizable budget. And I thought 3 years and not having been audited for those specific ones, I thought should have been considered more so in your audit plan. Well, not yours, but in the audit plan.
Understood. So you would consider the length of time since it's been audited to be more significant?
Well, that coupled with strategic budget risk.
Mhm.
You have 10% for budget, but if you have a large budget or a pretty good sizable budget, and you have not been audited in quite a bit of time, I think that in itself puts it at what strategic risk?
The impact of us, of the district being able to achieve its goals.
Okay. So I'm just saying that for next year that should look at these weights, and I think 3 years was too long. I don't know we have any of those anymore, but it's just that there should be as they have a big budget, they should be considered to be audited a little bit more often than the.
So more on a cyclical basis.
Yeah.
Okay, that's definitely something we can
And
consider.
that's why I wanted you to talk about the risk analysis at the beginning.
Okay, no, that's definitely something that we can consider.
Okay. Continue.
Okay. Any other questions on the risk assessment? The remainder of this evening, we will be talking about how we audit, who we audit, what it's like to be audited, and why we do what we do. I'm just going to switch presentations here just a second. So these are the items that I want to go through today. The internal audit practice principles. So those are designed by the Institute of Internal Auditors. The Institute of Internal Auditors is the professional association that we follow their standards. They are the globally recognized leader in the practice of internal audit. We'll go through our current org chart as well as the local policy CFC, which governs us. We'll go through our internal policies and procedures. We will look at our audit process, what we do in each phase of the audit. We'll show you our draft audit report, our audit report template, excuse me. And we will finish off with a discussion on not just the hotline management, but on what is fraud and what are some red flags of fraud. And please, I want this to be conversational as much as it can be. Please interrupt at any point if you need clarification or if you have any questions. That would probably be a lot easier than waiting till the end. This first slide here, the internal audit principles, as I mentioned, the IIA, the Institute of Internal Auditors, they've come up with these 10 core principles for an effective internal auditing shop. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I just wanted to point out a couple of words here. Integrity we see often. We must act with integrity. Competence and due professional care. The third one regarding being objective and independent, we will see that over and over, and throughout the standards we see that. And again, when we look at the CFC local policy, we will show how the way we're structured allows us to be objective and independent. The fourth one, we don't have our own agenda. We don't think things should go our way just because we say they should happen that way. Our work should align with the goals of the district. And when we design our tests, when we look at what we audit, we have the strategies and objectives and risks of the district in mind. The IIA standards is what governs all of our work. It's how we audit. As I said, the IIA, the Institute of Internal Auditors, is a globally recognized professional organization that has been around for quite some time. I'd like you to refer to your booklet, the thicker booklet, the second yellow tab labeled IIA standards. What's on the screen is a summary of all the standards. The standards that IIA provides to us to guide our work, it's divided into two different parts. There's the attribute standards and performance standards. So it shows us how an effective audit shop is set up and how we should be performing our work. Now, these standards, the current, these were last updated in 2017. They've actually revamped the standards, but they're not going to be effective until 2024 at the earliest. So they're very similar, but they've reformatted it quite a bit. But we'll go with the existing standards. And I am not going to go through all 25 pages of the standards with you, but I would like to point out one of the standards, I believe it's 1300, that talks about quality improvement and how we ensure that internally we continue to do what we need to do. They do have an internal assessment and a peer review that does actually take you through the course of going through all 25 pages, all of the standards, to ensure that that your work aligns with them. Just to highlight a couple of things in here, page 3 of that booklet, again, talks about independence and objectivity. An internal audit office must be independent and objective. We cannot do the work that we need to if we are not free from conditions that threaten our ability to perform our responsibilities. Luckily, the way that we are structured and the way that CFC has codified it, we are independent and objective.
Excuse me, Amy?
Yes?
Can you just quickly give us an example of when an internal auditor has somehow strayed into not being independent? Or what might be the auditor doing that we should recognize or the auditor should recognize has compromised the independence, either because management has compromised it or the other way around?
You know, I think there's a couple of examples I could give. One is how it's structured, how it's set up. Back years ago, it was common for the internal audit function to report to the CFO, to report internally. That created a lack of independence because especially within the CFO's function, you're auditing accounting, you're auditing purchasing. When you're auditing somebody who potentially could fire you, that creates an independence issue. But as I said, we're not structured in that way. But another way that independence could be impacted is the relationships that you build within your entity. If you have a relative that works in the department, that if my brother was the purchasing director, that would impact independence, or if you have a very friendly relationship with somebody. Now, there are ways to work around that because sometimes you can't help it. We do go through a process every year where we document and ensure that we are independent of any of those types of relationships. But if something were to come up, for example, if one of the staff, their sibling got hired somewhere. Well, if their sibling got hired to Hanks High School. Well, when it's time to audit Hanks High School, that auditor would not be put on the engagement. Somebody else would handle it, and that person would be removed. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay.
We're still talking about, are you still on page 3?
Yes, but you can
On
advance it.
page 4, which caught my eye right away, is direct interaction with the board.
Yes.
What are the boundaries for this? Well, this is just a one-liner.
Excuse me? I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Direct interaction with the board says the chief audit executive must communicate and interact directly with the board.
Yes.
What does that mean?
On-
Page 4,
It's
25.
1111, standard 1111. Like this interaction with the board. We interact, I have the ability to reach out to any one of you, to update you or to talk to you. I think that's the interaction that they're talking about.
The thing is that I think standard procedure would be that if I were to ask you something, that you would need it to report to me as a board member. I think it's standard procedure that everybody gets notified of whatever it is that we are talking about. That way, can we make that as a standard?
Sure. So whenever I have a discussion with you, to reiterate it to everyone else, am I understanding
Yeah,
correctly?
if we ask you a question about whatever it is that you're auditing and what, say Hanks High School, and how is that going, what is it? And then the rest of the board should be notified that I ask you a question on Hanks High School, whatever it is.
Okay,
And that's just standard as far as other information that it's passed on to us board members. That way, we're not, we're always aware of what's happening.
everyone's aware of everything.
Yes,
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
I think you bring up a very good point, but now you can begin to see tendencies,
right.
and by the rest of us being abreast
We share.
of what's going on there or here, wherever it might be.
Yeah, if I ask you what's happening at, this department, and I show an interest in it because of something, I'm just asking. But even for asking, you should share that with the rest of the board members that Mr. Ochoa asked this question, and we were going to provide him with the information, and you provide everyone the same information. That way, there's no, I didn't know about that,
I think that's an important point. Mhm.
Okay.
A couple of other things to point out, just to show that we follow it. Regarding 1220, do professional care. So we do have to ensure that we have the skills set, that we do the right trainings in order to complete our tasks. It does say do professional care does not imply infallibility. We may make mistakes, but our own internal procedures try to mitigate any potential mistakes. We do have review procedures in place.
On that point, I have a question for you.
Yes?
It seems like public ed in general, okay, where we get in trouble is, the due diligence we have in our performance and our behaviors and the way we conduct business. And so I guess my question to you is, and I've always been a big believer of who guards the guards, okay? So internal assessment, evaluating internal assessment, that's your responsibility, and that's our responsibility somewhat too. But the external assessment, are you planning to do that? Are you planning to bring somebody in anytime in the near future to look at how you're doing things? And
So if you look at Standard 1300, Quality Assurance and Improvement Program, in order to say that you comply with the standards, you do have to have a periodic review, a peer review. So it is an external team that comes in and analyzes your work, how you're structured, how you operate, to make sure that you are performing how you should be.
okay, so
So
you have
we-
it scheduled, or, I mean,
we
it's
don't
not
have it
fair to you, it's not fair to you because you just started. So I guess, do you have something in mind where you want to be at with this?
It needs to be done every 3 years. So
Okay.
I think in 3 years, we'll be ready.
Okay.
And do you know when the last one was done? I don't think it's been done for quite a while.
I am not aware of one being done in the recent past. And recent, I mean,
That's true.
5 to 7 years, I'm not.
Matter of
Aware.
fact, Mr. Rosales can probably remember, we did internal audit training downstairs over by the atrium, well, way before COVID. And but it was an outside group that came in and
It was an
trained.
outsider from the city that Ms.
That's right.
Lieber recommended, and it was, that was a workshop, but I don't think we've had a peer review in a very, very long time, at least what's talking about in the 1,300 here.
Yeah.
That's not to say that we've got to do one right away. I just
No.
want you guys to know that that's probably something we should work towards because it hasn't
Absolutely.
been done.
And in 3 years, I don't know where we're going to be in 3 years, but whoever's here, you will notify them of what the results are from that review. Right?
Yes.
I don't know where we're going to be 3 years from now.
Which is interesting because her book says 5 years.
Further on in the standards in the 2000 sections, that's when it goes into the performance standards. So it goes through everything on how we set objectives, how we set our scope, resource allocations to projects, how we develop the work program. It provides us the models that we should be following within our work. And these are what we have incorporated into our own procedures, which we'll be able to show you a little later. I'm going to go back to the presentation. Or do you have any other questions on the standards before I go back to the presentation?
I don't think so.
This is the current structure of our office, and I would just like to take this opportunity to have each of them stand up. Obviously, me, Amy Sanchez. We have our clerk 4, Norma Miner. Norma. We have Rebecca Garcia, who assumed my position as senior staff auditor on the end. Our staff auditor 2 is currently vacant, but as I said, we had interviews today and HR will be working through their process. We have Rod Chavez, who is our current staff auditor 1. And we are lucky to have Shelby Hamill, who's our part-time audit intern, a current master student at UTEP. The typical internal audit office generally has about 4 different levels of responsibilities. While these titles aren't exactly like ours, our titles are different, but we operate in a similar way. So the first level, the director, which would be my position, oversees the office, is responsible for developing the audit plan, performing the risk assessment. I sign off on all audit reports, approve audit programs, and review the next level's work product. And as needed, I do perform audit testing. Everybody performs testing. The next level, which many other internal audit offices would refer to as a manager, for us, that is the senior staff auditor role, which Rebecca fills. So that level of responsibility includes developing the audit programs, performing the testing, drafting the reports, and reviewing the more junior level work product. Then you have the senior and staff. The difference between the level 1 and level 2 staff is that the level 2 would start reviewing the work of the level 1. So the entry level, the staff level, primarily performs the audit testing, and then it goes up from there. And that's how a traditional audit shop is structured. As I mentioned earlier, the CFC board policy, it is set up to allow us to have our independence and objectivity. It states that we report functionally to the board and administratively to the superintendent. So what that means is our function, our purpose, our core business of auditing, that is overseen by the board, that portion of it. So the board approves our annual plan, receives all audit reports, makes the final decision in the hiring or removal of the internal auditor and approving the annual budget. The administratively to the superintendent does receive all audit reports as well. and also ensures that we have the administrative support that any other department would have, budget, procurement, TIS, HR, as well as the other administrative duties such as approving time and attendance, travel, purchasing, those kinds of items. The board policy also, which is good, it explicitly states that our office is given full, free, and unrestricted access to all district activities, records, property, and personnel. That is essential for us to perform our duties. We need to be able to talk to any employees that we need to talk with, and we need to be able to review any of the documentation that we need to perform our function. Yes.
When you're going to talk to anyone, any personnel, is there a special request form or something that you have to fill out before you go and talk to that individual?
No, there isn't. And the only, generally, we would only talk to different employees during the course of an audit, or if we had a hotline call that we need to follow up on, or, during the risk assessment time, but we are able just to pick up the phone and
So you have
contact whoever we need
direct
to.
access to everyone?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes. These are a few of the responsibilities that are included within the policy, developing and implementing the annual plan. It does say that we need to establish and maintain our fraud hotline, which we do, and we'll talk about that a little later. We have to issue written reports to the board, and there is some coordinating with external auditors. Now, this is a link to our policies and procedures manual. So all that I've talked about so far and all that I will be talking about in the next slides about the audit process, we have wrapped all together into our policies and procedures manual, which is our internal tool guide, and that is one of your handouts. It's the one in the plastic cover. We won't necessarily go through all of that, but I just wanted to point out that we do have all of this documented for us already to reference, and as our resource, or if any questions come up, we say, well, what does our policies and procedures manual say? If you see on page 34, it also includes just general office policies, our expectations internally of our folks. It includes record retention that we should be following. On page 36, it talks about how we do our annual planning and the methodology we use with our risk assessment. Page 39 talks about fraud investigations. So we try to make sure this is a comprehensive guide for our department. Yes?
Okay, let's say down the road, you meet up with somebody that is avoiding you or not being cooperative. Is there a policy as to how you're going to handle procedures? How do you handle that?
I don't think we have that explicitly written in there, but it does happen. We do have, occasionally someone will be less responsive than what would be expected, but usually that is resolved by going to the person's supervisor, and it's usually,
So you follow a chain of command?
yes,
Okay.
yes, we do. And if it ever got to the point where we call it, it impacts our scope, which means we can't review everything that we need to review, it would have to be something that we brought to your attention, because it means we can't do our audit because we're not getting cooperation. But that seldom, if ever, occurs.
Well, no, but you never know. And you would document all this and put it in a report?
Yes.
I think along those lines, there should be something, at least in a very general method of your actions in the event that we do have someone that continuously is delaying. I mean, if it were.
Trustee Rosales, Can you please speak into your mic?
I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry. It's on, it just needs
Oh,
to,
okay.
we just need to face it. Thank you.
I would think this is, we're talking about today, but then we're talking about tomorrow. And maybe something that would be some form of declaration that there'd be a certain time, 60 days, 45 days, whatever the case might be, in my opinion.
Okay, we can talk about updating our manual. That, in the audit world, it's called a scope limitation, and we can decide if we encounter a scope limitation, how are we going to address that here? Yes, that's a good item to add.
Thank you.
Any other questions before I move on to our audit process? So the next few slides, I am going to explain how we execute our audit. Now, each of these areas is based on the guidance set forth in the standards and is common stages that most internal audit offices follow. We have four main stages: planning, fieldwork, reporting, and then follow-up. So every engagement will have these. Now, I say that, but I do have to mention that for an engagement like an investigation or a hotline report, it's slightly different because it wasn't planned, it came up. But for your typical audit, it goes through these four stages. So in the planning process, if we're doing a campus audit versus a non-campus audit, they look a little different because the campus audit, as we'll see in a little while, follows a certain template, certain procedures that we generally follow all the time. But there is some planning aspect because we like to focus on the higher risk areas within the campus, so there is some process of data analysis, financial analysis. We do some analytics to see if there's any outliers, see if there's anything of concern. But generally, for a non-campus audit, the steps that we'd go through, there's a lot of research up front. We have to understand the department. We have to understand their processes. We have to understand what state and federal regulations they fall under. We have to look at any manuals or board policies that they should be following. We interview directors and the staff to understand how they conduct their business. And through all of that, we come up with risks. What do we identify as the highest risks for that particular department or process? For example, when I say risk, let's say we're looking at pre-K enrollment, and let's say there's a risk, I'm just making this up, there's a risk that if we enroll ineligible students, it might impact funding. So then we would design our objectives and audit program based on that. So once we identify the risks, we have to make sure we identify objectives to make sure that those risks won't happen. And we design tests around them. So if we go with that same example of pre-K enrollment, our objective is to ensure that students enrolled in pre-K and whatever school year are eligible and have the proper documentation. So then your audit program, your steps that you would take to test for this would be to obtain a list of all enrolled pre-K students in this year, select a sample, and verify that each one follows certain criteria, whether it's age, whether it's economic status, or whatever criteria they have to do to enroll. The last step in the planning process is to communicate all that to management. If you look at your green tab, the audit process, the second page there is our template, what we call our engagement or objective letter. So this is sent to the auditee once we have our objectives and we're selecting a sample to notify them that this is what we're going to look at and what to expect. Then that brings us into the field work where we actually do what we call our testing. we execute the audit program. We get the sample from the department and go through each one and test it against the criteria. We do come up with a preliminary list of, these look like the areas that are incorrect. We go back to the staff, say, hey, we found this. Could we possibly be missing something? Is there additional documentation to explain this? Sometimes there is, sometimes there's not. So we'll confirm whether there's an exception or not. Once these exceptions are completed, we develop what we call our finding template, which makes it a lot easier to develop our report, and that's on the page after the engagement. Rebecca designed the template, so she's just going to explain. Rebecca and Rod will be participating here or there in the workshop today, if that's okay. So if you'll refer to the finding worksheet.
Good evening, Rebecca Garcia, Senior Staff Auditor. So what we're looking at, after we've done all the testing, we've already talked to the staff and made sure that they are actually issues, discrepancies, exceptions. We developed the finding worksheet. And what it's going to do is we're going to write the finding, and then we're going to put the criteria. The criteria will be the policy, procedure, regulation that the finding actually violated, or they should be doing, the process they should be doing and aren't doing. And then the next would be the cause. What's causing this issue? What's causing this discrepancy? What's causing the internal control violation? And then next we're going to assess the risk. How much of the risk is it? Is it a high priority, which is red, right? That means it's a critical risk to the district. It's going to impact the district. The next one would be orange, which is high, which would be, it would substantially affect the district. And medium and low, these are more local, like isolated toward the campus. It's going to impact the campus reaching their objectives and their goals, okay? And then so based on the cause and the criteria, we're going to make a recommendation on what they should do, what management should do to correct the issue, okay? And the reference is going to reference the actual work paper. What we should do, from the finding worksheet, we should go to our work papers, and everything should align, and everything should support one another. And from the finding worksheet, then it goes into the report, and the report will match the same criteria, the same risks. Okay. Any questions on the finding worksheet? Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, I forgot to ask if it was okay if they participate. Once we finalize what our findings are, we then develop our draft report. We sort it by severity so that the most significant finding comes first. Then we meet with the director or the principal who oversees the area, and at that point, we request the corrective action plan from them. We do also ask for a responsible party and implementation date. Regarding the implementation date, although they do say, okay, we're going to have this resolved by such and such date, we do review it for reasonableness. So if it's something that's critical, something that needs to be taken care of immediately, and they're saying it's going to be done the next year, we will have a conversation and say, hey, that's not reasonable, let's change the date. Once we receive the corrective action plan, we issue the audit report, and it goes to, as you know, the superintendent, the board, the chiefs, the relevant associate superintendent, and the director or principal over the area. Yes.
on this one that we just got shown with the risk and everything.
Uh-huh.
And the recommendations, do you use that to formulate your corrective action plan?
Yes, so we try to word the recommendation in a way that's actionable and that addresses the cause of the finding, so that, if they implement that, then it addresses the cause.
So this is basically your data sheet.
Excuse
for
me?
This is basically your data sheet for the
report.
report.
And Amy, the point in time that this becomes subject to open records is after this last.
After the audit report is issued. So none of these.
Which includes the corrective action plan.
Which includes the corrective action
And
plan.
management's response.
Yes, yes. But any of these tools that we're using, whether it's the finding sheet or the engagement letter or any of those are considered part of our working papers, and so those wouldn't be subject to open records.
So if whatever is open to the public would be able to see all sides of it.
Yes,
The internal audit side, the management's response, the corrective action plan, the whole bundle.
yes.
Okay, thanks.
And we do have a template internal audit report, also within that same section, the green section, for your review there. And you can see that there's yellow highlighted parts, and that would be, the expectation is management fills that out. Once the implementation date has passed, we will check in with the auditee and say, hey, we're coming in for a follow-up. If they're ready, if they've already implemented it, we'll verify it. If they haven't, then we'll assess, we'll need a reason why. If it's reasonable, then we'll extend the implementation date.
Amy, when do you include legal?
Excuse me?
When do you include or talk to the legal department on any of these processes or anything that you might find? When do you consider bringing in the legal department?
We would consult with the legal department if there was like a significant compliance violation that puts the district at a significant risk. If something perhaps illegal has happened.
Because we just want to avoid anybody saying they were not informed legally or anything. Somebody did something, and then they would come back and do a lawsuit against them.
Well, if it's anything that would probably need administrative actions, we would discuss that with Bobby even before the report is
Or
issued.
the superintendent.
I think what he means is the legal department is not in your audit universe, and neither is the superintendent's office. In other words, we're not listed as subject to an audit.
I don't think we have legal. I think we just combined you with the superintendent's office with the board as far as expenditure testing.
You're with them.
That could be good or that could be bad. I mean, either way.
But again, another omission from the audit universe that we will need to correct in the future is on the TIS aspect, the information security side. We don't have an IT auditor at this point. There are tests that we could do, but that is definitely something that we do need to update the audit universe for.
So Amy, there is TIS on here, but I understand that sometimes organizations like banks, they have a whole separate process for looking at whether their TIS systems are adequate to support the whole enterprise.
I think it could be more detailed.
Okay, thanks.
So it wouldn't be necessarily that we look at that, set up
What's TIS?
or the information security in general, or different aspects, whether we divide it into networking or.
Simplistically, not unless it's complicated as a banquet.
When one was traveling 128 days, it was 226 days calendar.
Or do we, would we need one?
$7,000 on travel.
Then a bunch of things.
I think
That isn't the board and the superintendent.
the
That's
growing
one
threats
individual.
of information security as a whole, I think would
So
warrant,
it's something that we should entertain?
yes. Yeah,
Talking about TIS, your records, your audits, where are they stored?
on the server.
Whose server?
Um,
No, I'm just saying, do you have
We have our own,
privileged rights to just that?
we have our
information?
own shared drive. I don't know enough about how it's stored, whether it's its own server, if it's on a server with others, but it is limited to our access, if that's what you're referring
Well, I
to.
think you should ask Ms.
Yeah.
Chavez about that, to make sure that all these records are protected.
Mhm.
So there's no, and they're backed up. I'm sure they are, but you only.
We
just
do
your
have internal
department-
backup procedures
Just your
too.
department has,
A dedicated server.
yeah. This is what he said, a dedicated server, which is yours,
Okay,
and only yours. That way, nobody can. Only you can get access to it, and your staff. That way, there's no compromise of any
Okay.
information that's in there.
definitely.
Got that?
And we will issue a follow-up report at the end to inform you of whether the corrective actions have been implemented. Any questions? We do have the campus audit to go. We have sample audit programs there in front of you. Time permitting, we can go through that, or we can go through fraud first.
I think we see these campus audits all their career here.
Okay,
We fairly understand those.
Are they in colors?
so the campus, the sample campus audit programs,
Our board chair likes colors, so
the colors?
Yeah.
Color codes for.
likes colors.
Oh.
So forewarn you.
Well, they're there for your review, and if you,
What are your basic takes?
we've modified it quite a bit. So we do have the cash handling side of it and the student attendance side of it. We have changed our procedures, our sample sizes. So I do think we'll have pretty strong recommendations once these first round of campus projects
I
are done.
remember during the time that I've been here, in numbers, there was always the lack of time, the money was deposited, and the report was not done, et cetera. Are we away from that now, or are we still confronted with those?
There's still, we still need to hold the campuses accountable to some of the processes. But we focus on significant violations. I think you'll find that the audit reports will look different.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that I think auditing departments at central office is relatively straightforward, and you and your department have the technical expertise and the experience to do that. There's no question. I think ASB accounting has always been problematic. And the reason for that is it involves coaches and sponsors, and there's a huge turnover rate district-wide. And typically, the number one defense when you bring it to somebody's attention, whether it be a football coach at this high school or a volleyball coach at that high school, is they always seem to fall back on the district never provided training. Does the training come out of your office, or is the training something that I need to make available to coaches and sponsors and principals and assistant principals and athletic coordinators? Or do you assume both of those responsibilities? Because if you tell me my responsibility is to audit the activity, the sport, the allegation that there's 100 helmets missing somewhere, but my responsibility is to make sure that when somebody's hired as a coach or a sponsor, that we have some kind of a system in place where you can't assume that role and responsibility until you've completed a 9-hour training or a 12-hour training or an 18-hour training. Because we had situations where it was clear to me that people had made poor decisions relative to how they handled money. For example, one of the things that I can't impress upon people enough is the idea that it's not okay to use a square on your phone to swipe people's debit cards and collect money for your club or your sport. So that's a really long way of just asking you, is that something that we as a district need to do, provide the training because your role is exclusive to the audit?
I think it would impact independence and objectivity if we provided training, because what it would put us in the position of is we're telling them what to do, and then we're auditing them regarding what we told them to do. So it's more appropriate coming from the district, coming from management. That being said, I have remained in regular communications with David Solis. There's discussions of revised trainings. Pre-pandemic, there were requirements that sponsors have to go through specific trainings before they're permitted to do fundraisers. The pandemic really disrupted a lot of that, and it created a lot of turnover in business clerks and secretaries and sponsors. So I think we are at the point now, and I've talked with David about it, to bring that training back, to revamp the guidebook that the sponsors and the clerks get. So he does recognize a need for that as well. Does that
Amy,
answer?
So I guess that's a good point that he's making, is that internal audit states this, and would it be appropriate for then the internal auditor to report and saying, hey, trustees and superintendent, we've seen a 25% increase in these types of cases for the year. Now, what they do with it after that is not on you, but it is our responsibility as the leadership of the district to come up with a plan and work with our superintendent, which is kind of what we've been doing on our own, but we make our own judgments, which we'll have to continue to do. But I think it's reasonable for you to come back and saying, hey, guys, we're struggling with this. And by the way, we struggle with this for the 8 years that I've been on this board. It's the same thing, And by the way, more often than not, it's not malicious. It's just I was never trained, or this is the way we've always done that. And so I've got some clerk out there with $500 of popcorn money in her drawer, year-round.
There is an online recorded training, I believe, that's available. I'm not sure if it's widely known, especially to newer sponsors. But again, I have had discussions with David on, he has some plans on making some improvements. And as we do, as we go through more campus projects, not just on the cash handling side, but on the attendance side as well, we will bring up and communicate patterns that we see, widespread patterns that may need to be addressed at the district level and aren't specific to a campus.
Okay, getting back to the campus audits. Dr. Latorre, where would that fall under your
I guess the challenge for me is who, other than the audit department, could deliver a consistent message as to what is supposed to happen? Because if you leave it to the administrators, the instructional leadership team, it's going to be presented 7 different ways at 7 different high schools. And so I think we need something that's uniform, and the best way to do that is to completely understand what our audit department expects of our coaches and sponsors and others that collect money, right?
But what we would expect is that they follow the district's policies. So we, at times, we will consult with David's group and say, you know, we see this in the handbook. Is this your expectation? Because when we talk to the campuses about it, we need to make sure that that's what your department's expectation is for them to follow.
So you've reviewed the handbook and you approve of the guidance contained in the handbook?
I think there's opportunity to improve the presentation of it.
Yeah, we could use your help on that so that because I agree that that's asking a lot to expect you or your team to go out and train coaches and sponsors, especially because they change frequently. But if you could work with us, look at the handbook and the current training, then we can send someone out from the central office periodically, whether it's Martin Segovia in athletics or Jim Vasquez, the appropriate person to go out and do the training with an understanding by the administrative team at each of the respective schools that anytime you hire a new coach or appoint a new sponsor, that training is required before they can begin to fundraise and collect resources. I think the reason it probably doesn't rise to the level of importance that some of the other areas that you audit does is because typically when someone commits fraud or steals from a program, it doesn't necessarily stain the entire district. It usually stains or brings into question the integrity of the coach and the program. And you get parents that are upset, but it doesn't damage irreparably the reputation of the district. The only thing that would do that is if we just continued to ignore it and allow someone to walk away with, hundreds or thousands of dollars. So I do agree that it's probably our responsibility to have something in place.
Sir, if I may, recently I looked at the sponsor handbook because we were dealing with some of the differences between the school-sponsored clubs and the student-sponsored groups. And like a lot of codes or manuals, over a long time, it gets added to or edited in sort of ad hoc ways, and over time, it's not a very cohesive document anymore. So I think we've come to that point maybe with this one, and since we are having a big shift where we're dividing sort of those very student, not school-sponsored clubs like Bible study and things like that the students have the right to form, but they're separate from the curricular clubs. Since we're doing that, this might be a good time to really kind of focus on that manual and clean it up and get it sort of looked at from an arm's length from someone who maybe isn't so close to it and won't read things into it, but will look at it with fresh eyes, and that can be almost anybody. But I think a lot of the people see what they want to see in it, or from what they've, and then they don't ask questions when they don't understand it. And so that's why you get a lot of diverse responses to
I'm
the
almost
same
certain
rule.
it's out of date because
Yes, sir.
the square is actually outdated because now you have Venmo and Cash App, and so we really do need to revisit that and have it applied to today's world.
And we'd be happy to work with whoever you suggest on that.
Just to clear my people's minds, what we're saying here is that we would, through your department, we would work, you all would work with Dr. La Torre's group or people to set up some form of format. And that takes into account the, like you just mentioned, Susan, the clubs, the various clubs that are evolving, but we still have, it all comes into a set of rules based on your expertise and the ability of him developing that program, if you would. So is that the way we're headed?
Yeah, what we'll do is we'll bring together some coaches, we'll bring together some sponsors, we'll take the old draft, and we'll go from cover to cover and red line and add language, delete, amend, all of that. When we believe we have the final draft, then we can take it to Amy, and at her leisure, 24, 48 hours, she can, just kidding. She can review it and say, this is sound, this runs a counter to what, and then we go back, take their advice, their suggestions, create a final draft, and then start working on how we're going to disseminate that to the schools and to the people that need to be intimately aware of what the expectations are in this district. And there may even be a need to have them sign something indicating that they've read and they understand what their expectations are. So if down the road we have a problem, we don't spend a lot of time arguing over whether or not they were trained, not trained, understood, didn't understand, that type of thing. We'll take care of it. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's a great
Can I just make a comment
suggestion.
on
That's
that?
very important.
Great suggestion.
With all due respect to Ms. Austin and the team in the district, we might consider TASB legal, because they may have a nice clean template for us to use, or for somebody to use in the district, that they can consider that. And I know they've been facing these things across the state.
That, the UIL, and there is an ASO. That, the UIL, and there is a statewide ASB organization that may have something, so that we're not reinventing the wheel.
Yeah.
Absolutely. However we can help. Any other questions on that? The final piece that we're going to look at is on fraud. So like we've been discussing, I think our biggest concern when we're doing the cash audits or anything like that is we understand there's going to be mistakes. Somebody might take a little long to deposit something, but what's really concerning would be the presence of fraud. So we'll just talk a little bit about what is fraud and why fraud happens. So the ACFE, the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, has this definition on their website. Fraud is any activity that relies on deception in order to achieve a gain. So the two things that need to be present in order for there to be fraud is deception. Somebody's lying, and they're lying in order to get somebody else's property, money, etc. This is an example. It doesn't take too long to Google school district fraud and get quite a few examples. I'm not sure if this is going to work. It's just a quick video that's an example that we found. And I'm not sure if we can't hear it, then I'll just stop and we'll talk.
Janesville High School bookkeeper has learned her fate for stealing from Craig High School. Jessica Warner-Reed admitted to stealing more than $300,000 during her 10-year career there. News 3's Jenna Midda was in the courtroom when the sentence was read and joins us now in our Rock County Bureau with more. Good evening, Jenna.
Hi, Charlotte. Family and former coworkers filled the courtroom today as Jessica Warner-Reed learned she will spend 2 years in prison after being sentenced for embezzling.
Obviously is a serious crime.
From forgery to theft to fraud, Jessica Warner-Reed took a lot of money from Craig High School.
$303,876.96.
Money that was supposed to be for the students.
It was money raised by kids through car washes, bake sales, and selling door to door. The money that was stolen was money that was used to do good in our school and in this community.
Instead of allowing that money to go to where it was intended to, it went into her pockets.
And making up those funds came at a cost for others.
The school district was able to replenish the fund, but ultimately it's the citizens of Rock County who are responsible for that. And so she's affected every taxpayer here in the county.
The prosecution made sure the judge knew this wasn't just a one-time thing.
As a repeated activity, over a 10-year period, lies and deception to the teachers, to the principal, to the students, about where their money went, repeatedly.
Warner Reed read an apology letter to the school.
I was put in a position of trust, and I took advantage of that. I looked people in the eye and lied and deceived daily. And for that, I am truly sorry.
And to her family.
I'm sorry for letting you down and being selfish. It is hard knowing that I disappointed so many people.
After stealing so much money from the school, Warner Reed is now paying for her actions. In addition to her 2-year prison sentence, Warner Reed faces 3 years of extended supervision, followed by 12 years of probation after that. The judge also ordered her to pay $250 a month starting 3 months after she's released from prison for restitution. Charlotte?
Jenna Middaugh reporting from Rock County tonight. Thank you, Jen.
So obviously that is something that would be very concerning and definitely something we want to avoid here. And but it is something that occurs. I think with this situation, the way it came out, I was reading a couple of articles. Her principal became suspicious of her bookkeeping and asked to see the records and asked to see the bank statements, and she refused. And the principal then took it to finance, and they did an investigation. And pretty quickly, they discovered that it was in the hundreds of thousands of dollars of how much she had taken over. I think it was a period of 6 years, from 2009 to 2015. She was able to take the money. So I guess in their school district, the bookkeeper, which would be like our business clerk, would actually take the money to their bank, to the campus's bank, and deposit it. But instead of depositing it into the campus's account, she deposited it into her personal bank account. She most likely didn't have much. There wasn't a review process, and she handled a lot of the processes herself. No segregation of duties, and which is likely what led to that situation. So why do people commit fraud? Donald Cressy, back in the 70s, was a criminologist who studied thousands and thousands of fraud cases, and he came up with this triangle, and he found that in all the fraud cases that he researched, these 3 items were present: financial pressure, rationalization, and opportunity. So the financial pressure can show itself in any number of ways. The person could have a significant amount of debt, whether that's from credit card bills or medical bills. It is very often that the person has a gambling problem. In my experience, several of, not here, but in other places, several of the cases I've seen, they've had gambling problems. They could also have an expensive lifestyle and live beyond their means. The second is rationalization. You know, we're all human beings. We all want to sleep at night. We all like to think of ourselves as good people. We don't like to think of ourselves as bad people. So we have to create these stories in our head to make what we're doing seem right. So they say, you know, I deserve it. You know, I don't get paid enough. I was supposed to have a promotion a couple years ago, or I work, 12 hours a day and I'm not paid any overtime. A lot of times they will just say, I'm just going to do this one time. I don't want my electricity bill to be cut off this month, so here's a couple hundred here, and I'm going to use that to pay my bill, and I'll pay it back next month. It won't happen again. But that's not what happens, because once they do that, they see that they're not caught. They see no one's watching. They see how easy it is, and so it just builds from there. The last leg of the triangle is opportunity. And this is the only leg that management or business owner can control. This is where we put in internal controls, where we put in reviews. So, we can't take away that person's financial pressure, and we can't, be that person's conscience to get rid of the rationalization, but we can take away their opportunity to do this. There's another little short video there, but in the interest of time, I don't think we need to go through it. Our own hotline, 595-4367, as you know, it is a separate telephone line. It's picked up by an answering machine. We check it on a daily basis, at least during the week. Transcripts are taken of every call, and then they're routed to the appropriate department. Most of the time, calls to the hotline have to do with personnel issues. I saw so-and-so sleeping on the job, so-and-so is having an inappropriate relationship with somebody else. Those aren't audit topics, those aren't auditable, so those are handed over to HR to go through. If it's anything of fraud or some non-compliance of a policy, we would open an audit project and go through it. The calls are confidential. Sometimes callers do choose to leave their contact information, and we will contact them for details if necessary. Yes.
The personnel issues, they're still documented, right? As they go in through the hotline.
They're documented, but we don't create audit reports out of them.
But they are documented, that something was said and that was passed on to HR.
Yes, so for every call, we would have the transcript and what we did or what HR did to resolve it.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we have traceability or some kind of.
Yes.
Okay.
That was the end of the presentation, and I think we went through all the handouts. There's a few extra resources within the booklet, within the fraud section, but I don't think we need to go through those. But if you do have any questions for me right now.
I think at the beginning, we didn't know what to expect. Just a review of an internal audit process. But I think overall, I think we had a better insight as to what your auditor department is going to do and the processes and the questions asked were very, very good. And I think that will help us as a board understand your role and your department's role in helping us maintain integrity for the district. And we appreciate you taking the time and your staff to be here. I can't say much more. I really got more than I expected from this workshop.
I just want to share something. About maybe more than that, about 25 years ago, whatever it was, I had a lady that I trusted completely. Deposits, anything went to her. And one day, I get a call from the bank, and he says, your account's short. I said, what? Anyway, to make a long short, turns out that this lady decided in 3 days to take my deposits and utilize them for her own benefit. But there was no, you do a lot of things on trust. And she'd been with me for about a little over 5, maybe close to 6 years. No procedures. So my dilemma was simply, the company called in, he said, you need to do 2 things. You need to fire that lady and then come up with $12,000 by tomorrow. So those are the kinds of things, the real things that happen, and you have that trust in people. And sometimes things don't work out that way. So I can tell you firsthand, so when you say audit to me, an audit is an opportunity. If I'm doing something wrong that I don't know, now's the time to rectify it and get it straightened out. As opposed to, oh no, here they come, they're going to, they're going to punish me. No, that's not the case. Because oftentimes we're dealing with human beings here, and we tend to do things that we think are right sometimes, and without knowing, we may not be doing what we should be. And so, to me, an audit, I welcome audits.
But I think she brought up a good point, especially for us here at Ysleta, is internal controls. If you had internal controls, if you had somebody monitoring her deposits, or even asking her, show me the whatever.
Well, she denied the whole thing.
Well, yeah, but how
Then she
we,
turned it on me that I took money from the bank.
but internal controls are part of any organization where you have deposits as well as withdrawals. Not just one person is in charge of all that. So it's just natural that you have, especially with a budget that we have here at Ysleta. I mean, even the smallest budget is worth having internal controls. So that way, it prevents somebody from misuse of equipment, funds, or whatever it is.
Well, the ones that I've come across have been when the ladies go out for uniforms, if you will, and then somehow the money is not accountable, and at least you get that version from it. And so that, I'm looking at this thing as something to avoid those issues.
Well, I have full confidence with you coming on board and your staff that we will avoid a lot of these big issues in the future. And we appreciate you coming every month and reporting to us. That's very important for us to have that one-on-one with you, so we can still have the channel of communication with you and your staff as well. Yes, sir.
Sanchez, just a quick question. How are you doing in the last couple months coming into this role? How you feel about it?
Oh, great. I love it.
And everything that you have asked for, we provided for you.
We've got great relationship with everyone, great collaboration. They've been very responsive. Management has been very easy to work with.
Sweet. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Yeah. Make sure you follow up on that, your own server.
Okay.
And maybe even encrypt it. That way, that way your records are always protected.
Will do.
You just bought a server.
I know.
Thank you.
There's a procurement process.
But thank you so much. If anybody else has any other comments, if not. Thank you, Amy. It was a very good presentation.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you again. I already thanked you. And if there's no further discussion, may I have a motion to adjourn? Adjourn. 9.